Hey, Montgomery, thanks for joining me today, brother.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, John.
Hey, so tell me, man, what was it like growing up as a Montgomery, and what did that look like for you with your father and mother and siblings? And just give us a little bit of background.
It got interesting really quick. My folks are from the Midwest. I was born in Geneva, Illinois, just outside Chicago. We moved to Southern California when I was about two and a half. So this was the early 1960s. I was born in 1962 and had an older brother. And my younger sister came along right after we moved to California. I remember my father getting an entry-level electronics job. He had spent a couple years in the Navy working aircraft electronics. And so entry-level job, bought a house on the GI Bill, and bought a new car, which I think contributed, unfortunately, to my parents getting a divorce. So he had a Triumph station wagon, if you can imagine that. And he bought an MG B 2+2. Yes, he has family of five, and he bought a sports car. We spent a lot of time at the NASCAR track. Let's put it that way. My uncle was a Goodyear tire testing engineer, so we got pit passes and all. But by the time I was 6, my parents were divorced. My father stayed living nearby, and my younger sister, my older brother, and I saw him religiously every Sunday. And I say religiously, but he didn't take us to church. We went to church as a family before the divorce. And it wasn't until later when I was an adolescent, I actually went back to church on my own. But my father saw us on Sundays, and we would go mini golfing. We would go to parks. We would go to movies sometimes. But we had this once a week relationship. And I do recall the time before the divorce, my father being electrical engineer eventually, was really into making things, doing things with your hands, which is very attractive to a young man. And I had a blast. So there was definitely a void. You tried to pack a week's worth of things for your father in one day, and you'd have to compete with your older brother and your younger sister. So I remember when we would work on things, it was basically my father and my older brother would do it, and I would watch. About a year after the divorce, my mother remarried. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So we grew up in Southern California, integrated community, which I'm personally grateful my parents chose to live where they live, because it was completely integrated. And this is back in the 60s. So we had a family friends that lived a block away, African-American couple. He was a retired tech sergeant from the United States Air Force, and she was a homemaker like my mother. And there was a tragic accident where she died, and my future stepfather, Bob, got a broken leg. About a year later, after my mother's divorce, they got married. And it was kind of cool because my best friend was the youngest boy in their family of 4. He had 2 older sisters and 2 brothers. So we were really good friends. We had 2 houses. There were 7 kids, and the 8th came along. So I have a mulatto half-brother. But that marriage did end when I was a teenager, and alcoholism was involved. Firearms were involved. And I'll never forget near the end of the marriage that Bob came over to my mother's original house. He had a weapon. He had a pistol. And he was inebriated. And that was part of the problem, drinking. And I'll never forget, my mother went out into the driveway to confront him. And I didn't really hear what was being said, but I saw from the kitchen door that she had put out her hand, and I saw the gun in his, and he put the gun in her hand. She turned around, walked to the door where I was, handed me the gun, and said, "Unload it." Now, my biological father had weapons and we would go out shooting. It was just a normal thing, so I knew how to unload it. But it was a frightening, significant event in my life. After that, between her next marriage was about 3 to 4 years, and those were tough times. I remember being not completely aware of the financial situation, but I remember wearing the same pair of pants to school just about every day for a year, and still seeing my father, my mother resenting my biological father for never offering to pay more money. I think he paid $100 per child per month or whatever it was. And my mother, after we became adults, she admitted that she felt that she should have asked for more money, but never did. But we drank powdered milk, had a hot dog roll for dinner with no hot dog in it. I mean, things like that. So you don't really think of yourself as poor when you're poor. It's just how things are. So it wasn't until later that I gained that perspective. But she married a man about 20 years younger than her for her third and longest marriage. And unfortunately, he passed away a couple years ago, colon cancer. And if there's anybody listening, get checked because there aren't symptoms until it's too late. So growing up, I would say I was raised by my mother. My stepfather was absent a lot, drank a lot. And so when he was in the house, it wasn't much going on except him getting ready to go back out again. I really did not feel like I had that opportunity to have a father growing up, even though I had a dad that I saw every Sunday. It was frustrating because, as I said before, my perception was that he paid more attention to my older brother, and I was just sort of a tag along. And, if you want to fast forward to my own parenting, I had made a vow to myself, whether consciously or subconsciously, I'm not going to be a weekend dad. I'm not going to be the father that my dad was. Even though I knew he loved me or said he loved me, it was just the manifestation of that love didn't connect,
So his words didn't meet his actions, in other words, right? It was like he could tell me he loved me all he wanted, but until I
Right,
saw it, really didn't
right,
make a lot of sense to me.
right. And another thing that sticks out to me, I got accepted to the University of Alabama. And I was excited. Everybody's excited. I really had no business going there because I couldn't afford it, but I borrowed my financial future away. And I'll never forget the week before I left, I asked my father for some money. And he said, "Oh yeah, I'll send you the check. Once a month, I'll send you $100." This was 1980. It was the same amount he was sending for, 15 years or 12 years. And I said, "Well, is there any way I can earn some money? Do you need any jobs done or anything?" I was pretty desperate. I need some cash. He said, "Sure." He made this list of about 8 or 9 things. And I must have worked at his house, I don't know, all day, 9, 10 hours. And I was completely exhausted. And he paid me about $80. And that's when I went to college with $80 cash. Oh man, I was pretty angry about the whole situation. I kind of blamed his second wife, which that marriage didn't last long. But I met my future wife in New York City at Columbia University, going to graduate school. And I finished that degree. I went back home to Southern California. I substitute taught in my home district. I got the best job I ever had in my life, working for Disneyland on weekends and holidays. Still the best job I ever had. I also joined the National Guard because I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Stripes. So in the beginning, they're feeling sorry for themselves. His girlfriend kicks him out, loses his job. He can't do one push-up, so on a bet, he joins the Army. but they watched the commercial Be All You Can Be. The commercial I watched was loan repayment, because I'd borrowed my way through college. And so I joined the National Guard for many reasons: serve my country, earn a little extra pay, loan repayment. The job I picked was combat medic, because I'm not the kind of person who want to shoot people. So I thought, hey, and I was a health and physical education teacher and coach, so I figured combat medic would be great, and it was. It gave me a lot of confidence that I could handle most things that might happen on a playing field or court. My future wife was a special ed and teacher of the hearing impaired. She's from Long Island, New York, where we live now, close to her parents, where she grew up. And, you never feel like you're ready to get married. You never feel like you're ready to be a parent. And so we put it off. Our oldest son just turned 24, and I'm 57. So we put it off a little bit. But initially we had 2 sons, and a third was in the oven. And as director of athletics was my job, and teacher of health and physical education, my kids were exposed very young to sports and athletics, and that's kind of a foundation for a relationship I felt with a son and a father. But at 6 and 3 in 2001, my 2 oldest boys and I think had a great relationship. I loved having kids because it lets you experience your childhood all over again. And you get to buy the toys you like, because they really don't care what you buy them. They'll play with anything. So some of the best times of my life was early on, just getting on the floor with them and having a blast. And then on about September 11th, 2001, my world changed. I had been transferred into a unit in 1999. The 800th MPs out of Uniondale, New York, was the only enemy prisoner of war unit in the Army, really. If you don't have a war, you don't need it. So a lot of the units in the reserves or units you only need if there's a war: medical, enemy prisoner of war, transportation, things of that nature. So we had trained Geneva Convention compliance, and we would play war games, and we had fake prisons set up at Fort Dix, New Jersey. But when September 11th came, I got called in. It was for about a week. And the general told us before we left, when we figured out what was going on, he said, pack your bags. Being the only reserve unit that trains for enemy prisoner of war, we got sent to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba in February of 2002. The mission stood up in January. Theodore, my third son, was born 2 days before I left for training. And just the sense of betrayal was consuming. That this person had not asked to be born and came into a world without a father. And that was my fault.
Now, let me ask you this, because I can imagine there's this incredible conflict, right? Of you become a part of the military, you have a duty, and yet you have this family going on at home and trying to balance or even just figure out how that works is got to be difficult. I can imagine the betrayal and all the feelings of guilt and everything that come about as a result of that. How were you able to kind of find peace with all that, or were you?
I prayed a lot. Love from my family, staying connected to them, not falling into the trap of feeling alone and feeling sorry for myself for too long at a time, because there are times when you can't get out of your head, that you're by yourself. You don't have communication with your family. There were no smartphones in 2002. And the internet was a challenge at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to say the least. Phone calls were almost impossible as well because of the high security nature of the mission. Everything was slowed down. But,
Now,
a
now
man
with
should know.
with that, before we jump too far into that story, in the early days, even with your two younger sons, because you grew up in a household who had ultimately what, three dads? You had three fathers. Is that, am I tracking right?
Yes, you're tracking. And three stepmoms on the other side.
How how was it that you learned how to be a dad? Were you just kind of figuring it out on your own? Were you watching other men that seemed to be doing it pretty good, or what was that
Come
like
on
for you?
now, you're not that much younger than me. We
No, you're right. I'm not. You said you
leave it
waited.
to Beaver. I mean,
Yeah.
Ward Cleaver would come in, throwing a smoking jacket, a pipe, and a newspaper out. um, Mr. Brady was one. He had a home office. I thought that was pretty cool from the Brady Bunch. We learned from television because none of my friends, their fathers were not that involved either. Their dads were working. But where's your dad? Oh, he's at work. Or they have hobbies, or they're out with the boys, or it was free range child rearing. You would go outside and you come home when it was supper time or the sun went down.
So was
Um,
it the same way in learning also how to be a husband? I mean, to love your wife. You saw obviously all kinds of stuff growing up. Was that the same thing in figuring out how to love your wife well?
I taught health education in New York City Public High School, so I taught family living. I taught what a family unit was. And so I modeled myself after that curriculum. And at the time, in the 80s and early 90s, the curriculum said, well, the modern family households share responsibilities. So sometimes I do the laundry. Sometimes my wife would clean the bathroom. Sometimes I would vacuum. We shared those responsibilities as a young couple. We both worked, both in education, so our schedules kind of meshed. And then when I got promoted and had children to director of athletics, my real job really started after school. So with the young kids, I could bring them with me, or my wife could bring them and participate in the family experience that way. So I learned through teaching how to be a good husband. All that changed on 9/11. All that changed.
So
Uh,
fast forward, did they take you and go to a specific area to train you before you went to Guantanamo Bay?
that's correct. We were sequestered at Fort Dix, New Jersey, for training prior to deployment. I got to come home once or twice, but only for a day or two. So I saw my son, my third son, Theodore, for maybe a total of 5 days before I deployed for 6 months. And there was no coming home during that 6 months.
Dude,
Uh,
tell me what, if you can think back, like your first day at Guantanamo Bay. I'm sure it's overwhelming. There's probably 100 different emotions going on, but what do you remember about just even that first day walking in there and just this job that you've been given to do, and how you were processing that?
so on the way over, on the flight over, you kind of, there are some low points where you're feeling sad and angry at the bad guys, for causing the attack on 9/11. I really focused my anger on them, even though my job was to take care of them. But on the plane trip over, a lot goes through your mind. But then at some point, as you get close and you look out the window and there's Cuba, you start to get excited because you've trained for your job, you know your job, and you want to do your job well. So landing on the tarmac and getting out, I kind of felt like the one of the opening scenes in the movie Platoon, where the main character gets out of the plane and you can almost feel the heat, and he's just kind of bewildered. But we woke up pretty quick because that next day we greeted a couple of dozen bad guys on the tarmac, took them into the Camp X-Ray, As a medical officer at the time, my job was to oversee the processes. So we spent many hours in camp that day watching each individual detainee being in processed. And I'm not going to say it was brutal, but it was a military operation. Later that night, your mind goes back to your family while you're there, the anger, the sadness, the feeling that no man should ever leave his family for any reason, but duty, country, honor, that gets into your head. So you can rationalize why you're doing what you're doing, but it doesn't change the feelings inside of you that said, dude, your wife is home with 3 kids. How does she do that?
Well, and I can imagine too, not only are you kind of pissed off that you're having to be away from your family, but then you're pissed off that these guys did this to then make you be away from your family, right?
My hatred was visceral toward them, but you can't show that. You can't show any emotion in front of a detainee. You can't engage them in conversation. So my job was basically to look over medical intelligence, to inspect the camps, to help facilitate their healing. And that's probably been one of the biggest conflicts of my life. But I do talk about that in my book. So the book I wrote is called Saving Grace at Guantanamo Bay, a memoir of a citizen warrior. And I kept a journal on my laptop computer while I was there, and I took notes, and it's pretty raw. And there are some angry moments, but there are also some poignant moments where I see other soldiers, sailors, male and female, doing extremely brave things, doing extremely courageous and honorable things every day. That made me very proud of that mission, that there was never any torture. There was some abuse, but it was very light abuse and dealt with very swiftly. It's probably the most disciplined operation I've ever been part of because of the high visibility. But I worked with International Committee of the Red Cross physicians who told me no one does detention operations better than the U.S. And we gave them complete transparency over the mission. Now, the ICRC doesn't go to the media and say what a wonderful job the U.S. is doing. They're sworn to secrecy. So there wasn't anything like that getting out in the media, which kind of frustrated me for 10 years. It took me, I guess, 8 years to write the book. But in it, I do describe these feelings I had of being away from my family. I put in at least 1 or 2 emails that my wife sent me that really tore me up because she was telling me stories about what her day was like. Taking this one, and this one needs a diaper change, and this one threw up in the minivan, and just being complete, her feelings of complete abandonment and being alone. And I will say this about her, that she never once deliberately threw that on me. Not one time did she ever blame me for leaving them, never blame me for hurting them. And that has been part of the godsend that helps the healing, that she never did that to me.
And I'm sure it's this craziness of emotion of her sharing those things, just normal things that a mom goes through with watching kids. And there's a part of you that probably goes, man, I would love to be there to see my kid throw up in the van. It's as weird as that sounds, right?
Anything.
Yeah.
Change the diaper, I'll do it. But it was a complete feeling of helplessness, feeling completely helpless.
How did you kind of come to terms or reconcile? Because I can imagine in understanding and knowing, okay, even these, what we think are the most evil of men that have done all these just crazy, tragic, evil things, but knowing yet they were still children of God.
Mm-hmm.
How was there a time in this journey where you began to see them as that way? or how did that work out in your head?
Just the title of my book, and it kind of goes over most people's heads, Saving Grace at Guantanamo Bay. So what does that mean? God's grace is his power of forgiveness. But in the Christian faith, we believe in repentance before forgiveness. You admit that what you did was wrong, you apologize for it, you say you're never going to do it again, sincerely, and then God will forgive you. So saving grace to me means I'm going to do my job in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the army, as best as I can, as a man and as a man of God. And I feel I did that. And I feel most of the people that worked there did that. And that's why I titled the book that way, because I felt we were saving grace by demonstrating to these guys who would just as soon kill you as look at you, that this is who we are as a people. We demonstrated the American culture and the American spirit for these people. And whether they got it, whether they appreciate it or not, we'll never know. But we felt that was how we could save ourselves, by doing our job the best we could, by not showing our anger toward these people, but giving them all the courtesy and respect that we could muster. And let me tell you, about 99.9% of the people that dealt with them on a daily basis could do that.
And the grace, just showing them grace when I don't know, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in the Muslim religion or Islam, but showing them grace, which in probably in most cases, they had never even seen what that looked like, right?
So I do believe in peaceful Muslims. I have a cousin who converted. She's a British citizen. Her name is Yvonne Ridley, and she was captured by the Taliban back in the fall of 2001. And one of the things she agreed to, if they would let her go, is that she would look into the Muslim faith. So I've learned a lot of it through her, because she eventually did come back and convert. So I know that there are peaceful Muslims out there, but I also know that there are those who believe in Sharia. And I know that there are some who are committed to, if they have to, losing their own life to take the life of a non-believer. So with the radical Muslims, or what I call an Islamist, their faith revolves around theocracy. So their religion is their government. Their laws are their edicts that they read in the Quran. And that means that we're kafir. So kafir is a non-believer. And to a kafir, according to their interpretation of the Sharia law, which is within the religion, you either convert, you pay a tax or a jizya, or they may kill you or enslave you. If you're a female, you can convert, you can pay the tax, or you become a concubine or a wife. That's the radical Islam. But I understand and appreciate that there are peaceful Muslims who do not believe in Sharia law as their faith. But I would say most of the guys that went through Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, were the radical Muslim extremist or Islamist who, again, would just as soon kill you as look at you. There are about 23 different languages spoken there when I got there, with just under 300 detainees. A lot of them were soldiers of fortune, mercenaries. A lot of them went to Afghanistan so they could fight and kill Americans, including one Australian and some Spanish-speaking folks, some Russian-speaking folks. But there was a conglomeration there. So there were no conversions to Christianity, as far as I know. In fact, we provided them free of charge the services of a U.S. military Muslim chaplain. And the first one that I got there was fired because he was caught taking letters from them that hadn't been, looked over and trying to send those on for them. So there was a connection between that Navy Muslim chaplain and some of these men, which was scary to me. The replacement was a guy with an Irish name and an Irish look and red hair and pale as a sheet, and Irish as the day is long, but he was a Muslim chaplain.
Yes, so you had to, I mean, everybody probably picked him he stood out among the crowd, right? Well, you could tell.
And it was so hard to take the Muslim sensitivity training from this guy, but it was kind of like, these guys really would kill us if they could. They tried. They got into fist fights. They threw urine and feces on the guards. They spat on them. And there was combat sometimes. So it was kind of obvious. And then as you would hear things from the interrogation side of the house about some of them, we had some very high-level men. We had some men who were taken off the battlefield. Most of them were really bad guys, but every once in a while we came across one or two that really were just low-level operatives. But tens of thousands of detainees were taken on the battlefield. Only just under 800 ever made it to Gitmo, and 731 released. None of them were hacked to death, blown up, dragged naked and lifeless through the streets, drowned, or burned alive, which is all things that our enemies have done to us. So to me, there's no moral comparison between Gitmo and how our enemies treat detainees. That every American should know and feel proud of that mission there, because it is the very best in the world. They get free Qurans, prayer rugs, beads, halal meals, world-class medical care, dental. In fact, there's a picture I love to put on social media of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The day we captured him, disheveled, no beard, and a picture that was taken a few years ago. He's smiling with a large Quran in his hands, white robes on a prayer rug, fat and happy. So there is no myth about Club Gitmo. It exists. It's a Muslim paradise that we have set up for them. And it's all for psychological reasons. You and I can say, that's wrong. They should be treated like, the worst possible way. But prison psychology says you take care of them, so they're less dangerous to you and me, and they're more cooperative.
Were there any stories of just powerful stories that you saw within the time you were there of this example of grace? Even if they just connected with it for a short period of time, was there something that stands out in your mind that you can share?
Wild Bill, real name Abdul Razak. We called him Wild Bill because he exhibited extremely strange behavior. He would literally take bites out of his flip-flops. He would hang things from his genitals. He would cause riots. So how do you cause a riot when everybody's in their own cell? Well, you just make a lot of noise and ruckus. As time went on, we discovered that he was a heroin addict, gone cold turkey, but also medicated schizophrenic off his meds. So that combination took a while to figure out and then to verify. But once we verified it, then we could give him treatment and medication. But there came a point when he was determined to no longer be a threat, nor of any intelligence value. So he was actually the first person we repatriated. And since my unit was the Joint Detainee Operations Group, we were a liaison team. My commander was the camp commandant, and there was a 12-person unit with different branches in it. We had a JAG officer, a transportation officer, logistics, MP officers, and myself, the medical officer. Our boss chose us for the repatriation mission. I got to drive the Humvee that took Abdul to his freedom bird. So we picked him up and we went to the leeward side of Guantanamo Bay where the press was sequestered. The plane was not inbound yet, so we had to hide him in an abandoned hospital We had a psych nurse with us who monitored his medication, and we had an interpreter. So we sat in the back of a covered Humvee for a couple hours talking to Abdullah through the interpreter. And he said, dude, what's your story? And he says, well, to maintain my heroin habit, I picked up an AK-47 in Kandahar. So he was a foot soldier for the Taliban. And he was captured. And of course, after his capture, he became very anxious and then started to go through cold turkey withdrawal from heroin, and also exhibited symptoms from being off medication for his schizophrenia. And for folks who don't know about schizophrenia, it's basically out of touch with reality. Sometimes they hear voices, they might carry on a conversation and there's no one there, or there are people there and he's not facing you, talking to whoever he sees. So we were able to safely repatriate. I drove the Humvee right up to the airplane, which is very unusual. That's what I was told to do. And off he went. And we wondered, I wonder whatever happened to Abdul, you know? And then my boss and one of the other guys went to a party with the alphabet soup guys, CIA, FBI. They were part of a different command, but they would invite my boss, the camp commander. They came back from that party shaking their head. I said, boss, what is it? He says, remember that guy we repatriated? I said, yeah. So the CIA guys told me as soon as he got on the tarmac, they put a bullet in his head. And at that time, that was probably one of the lowest points of that operation. We had cared for him. We had treated him like we would want to be treated. And here, the alphabet soup guys say he was put out immediately. And well, why would they do that? They lied. This is why I will never, ever believe any FBI or CIA person. They are trained to lie. They enjoy lying. Wouldn't you know, a few weeks after that party, that NBC.com published a story with Abdul's picture sitting on a mental hospital bed in Kandahar, happy as a bug, talking about how well he was treated at Guantanamo Bay. Now, that never made the mass media. I was shocked at the time that NBC would put that in a story. But there he was, smiling, happy, healthy. And that made us all feel so good that we were able to contribute to this person's life. Because that's all we really want. We just want to be able to live. You know, and in this country, we expect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So to be able to pass that on to another individual, even though if he and I met on the battlefield, he probably would have tried to kill me. That wasn't our reality. That wasn't our reality. That wasn't our job to kill him. Our job was to make him well.
So let me get this straight. When you had driven the Humvee up to the airplane to release him,
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe he made a stop in Kandahar or whatever. That's when they did that little review. But then when he landed somewhere else, they put a bullet in his head?
No. The CIA guys lied to us. They knew that he made it safely and was taken into custody and put in a mental hospital. But that's not what they told my boss. They told my boss a lie that as soon as he hit the tarmac, he was killed in Kandahar. But he wasn't killed. Secret squirrels. You gotta love them, you gotta hate them, and you're glad they're on our side.
Yeah, but what would have been the motivation, though, for the CIA and those guys to tell your boss that they put a bullet in his head?
Just the thrill of getting away with a lie. Just the thrill of it. That's what they're trained to do. That's their job, is to lie. You'd hope that they would lie for the right reason at the right time. But just to BS. I mean, they obviously had a lot to drink that night.
You know, and that's I with the military, and this is something, and you could probably confirm this, but I see it in so many even military dads' sons that are grown men. And there's this, you talk about machoism and ego and arrogance and testosterone. You talk about the poser, you know, the ultimate poser and pretender to sometimes be so much more badass than what I really am. That seems to be the MO in a lot of cases with a lot of, not that there's not a lot of great guys out there, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
like you're talking about with CIA, that totally makes sense. That these guys just think they're whoever and are telling stories or
They're
BSing.
untouchable.
Yeah,
I,
untouchable. Yeah.
I was in charge of good guy and bad guy care. So I would get these personnel lists. And you've never seen more John Smiths and Tom Joneses, on the list. They all have the same name, and it's all alphabet soup. And that's their job, And it was eye opening and frustrating at the same time.
Was there time too? Because I could tell, even with like the Wild Bill story, that there's probably a part of you that feels a great sadness for these men because of what they've bought into in this extreme radical Islam, right? And so just like, man, if that guy would only know the truth, right?
There were some, especially the younger ones that came in. We had a couple teenagers come through. And I had worked with teens as a dean of students in New York City public high schools. So I was familiar with the get over sort of personality, the fakers, the kids that, wanted you to think one thing, but something else was going on. So when this one very tall Chadian, so he was very dark skinned, we were told he was 16 at the time. He may have been younger. He was shivering in the heat. So he was probably really nervous. And the way we had them is we would have come off the plane and they would have sensory deprivation items on them. You see on the cover of my book that they had the blacked out goggles, earmuffs, some had the masks on. So that is to keep them calm. So if you can't see or hear very well, you're not going to try to lash out or hurt anybody. And that was the theory behind that. We take that off, we strip them down, we throw them in an outdoor shower. They have soap on their body. We give them new, fresh clothes. But now we're going to do a medical exam on them, which is a cavity search to make sure they don't have any weapons or contraband. He fainted or pretended to faint. We got him in the shade on a stretcher and we popped him with some IVs. But the consensus was that he was faking, that he was either testing us or he was just really scared. And there was a time when I'm looking at this kid, maybe 6'4", really tall kid, skinny as a rail, just kind of shivering, out of fear. He kept asking, "Where am I? Where am I?" Of course, we were not allowed to tell him where he was. So you had a few like that, but just as many as you had like that, John, you had some who would stare you down. This one guy, I'll never forget it. He was maybe in his late 60s, one leg, and he didn't want to keep he had a prosthetic leg, but he kept taking it off and wanted to hold it. And of course, we couldn't let him hold it because it's a weapon. So we tried to get him to put it back on. He didn't want it on. He wanted to hold it. But the look that he gave you said, "I would just bite your head off if I could get close enough to you." He was so upset and angry. I can just imagine what he was like on the battlefield. Just one of those super soldiers, So that was the gamut.
Yeah, from the really young guy to the real old guy. And I can imagine even I've been in some prison settings here in the States and we did some interviews. We did some interviews for the movie. And I remember looking at a few guys as they walked by me. And these were in one of the maximum security prisons. It was rapists, murderers, you name it. And I was like, dude, it was eerie because it was almost like you could just see the evil within them looking at their eyes.
Certainly.
Wow. That's amazing stuff. Were you there? Because I have to ask, were you there when all the other stuff went down with the abuse or all the stuff that hit the media?
Yeah, like I said, there really was not abuse there. The type of abuse that I witnessed were things like an MP slapping a guy in the back of the head in the hospital for no reason, or taking somebody's blanket, throwing it on the ground. So those guys would be sent home, and some of them would face UCMJ charges. That's how serious it was. As far as interrogations go, those were done in sea huts. I observed guys coming and going, but never in a state of injury. In fact, if there were trouble at the camp, my boss would be awoken. He would wake me up. We'd go together. Sometimes the detainees would have to be put down. In other words, if they're going to be taken out for interrogation or for exercise, they're told to assume the position on their knees, hands behind their head, facing away from the door. 2 guards would then come in, put the handcuffs, the traveling belt, the shackles on, and take them out. Well, if the detainee refused, they'd be warned several times. And when they refused, basically what they were saying is, come and get me. And some of them would be there like this. And so the IRF team would be called. The internal reaction force would come in and picture 5 of the biggest guys in baseball catcher's gear. And they would basically go in and tackle them and hog tie them. Now, occasionally, the tackling would cause some kind of injury to the detainee. Maybe once I witnessed a broken bone. One guy hit his face on the concrete floor. We had to take him to the hospital for MRI. But the detainee knew this. They knew what was coming if they refused to cooperate.
Right.
As far as enhanced interrogation techniques, which were legal and approved at the time, if you read George W. Bush's decision points, he has parts of his book in there about it, that only a handful were ever waterboarded to obtain valuable information that saved many lives. And then Donald Rumsfeld, in his autobiography, Decision Points, has parts in there as well. And one part I remember said that he claimed that no one in the DOD was trained to do waterboarding. So the only people trained to do that are the CIA. And they're trained to do it in such a way as not to cause permanent harm, because if you cause permanent harm, well, that fits the definition of torture. And we all knew the definition of torture. And that was not part of what we did. In fact, we didn't do any interrogations in the Army in any physical way. It was always a question and answer. But that mission was kind of taken away from us and given to the alphabet soup.
So tell me, dude, what was it like coming back off that mission, coming home to your family? Put that into words.
Right. So we got back to Fort Dix. We were supposed to spend 2 days there, but my boss tried to get us out. And he got me out by hitching me a ride with the Brigade XO, a man I still know to this day. It's Colonel Ecke. Ironically, Colonel Ecke's wife was a maternity nurse at the hospital where my son Theodore was born. So she had actually cared for my wife after giving birth. So I knew Colonel Ecke pretty well. And he lived close by where I did. So God was smiling that day, because my boss came to me and I was depressed as hell, because I didn't think I was going home for another couple of days. And he said, "You got your bags packed?" And I said, "Why?" He says, "Colonel Ecke has some room in his car. You're going home today." And boy, that was a joy. That was the most joy I had in a long time. So he took me home, and this is the funny thing. When I got home, my family was not there. Everybody was gone, but they had written on the, and I think I have a photograph of it, they had written with colored chalk on the driveway, "Welcome home, Daddy." So here I am with my duffel bags. You know, I took my duffel bag, sat on my front porch, and I just kind of sat back smiling, saying, "Here I'm home." And then it kind of hit me, oh my God, My son is 6 months old. He doesn't know me. As soon as I touch him, he's going to be like a rattlesnake. He's going to cry and fuss, and I'm going to feel like a jerk. So fear started to creep in. So when the minivan pulled up, my two young oldest boys, Benjamin and Harrison, came running up. We hugged for a long time. I hugged and kissed my wife. And my third son, Theodore, was strapped in the car. And man, I'm telling you, I was so, anxious. But you know what happened? I went up and he kind of cooed. It was almost as if he knew. He didn't cry. He didn't fuss. He let me pick him up and hold him. So that was a very special homecoming. Very special.
Dude, I love it. As we wrap up here, man, there's not much that's going to beat that, actually. That's a great story. What's been your biggest struggle as a father, and how'd you overcome it?
I think, so there was a military time, and obviously during the war that I was a part of, especially, if you fast forward, I went away for another 6 months, but ended up not going anywhere, staying at Fort Dix, New Jersey for 6 months. And there was a time after training when we were told we're going every Monday, but you can go home this weekend. My wife said, please don't come home anymore. Because we say goodbye every time. So you say goodbye 8, 9, 10 times, it's really stressful. And then when I went away for 14 months, I did get to come home halfway through. There were those times when we struggled. And then when I came back, I was still in the military for some time. I retired in 2008. But after that, I had made a promise to my wife when I got back from Iraq. I said, I promise you that I will not leave this family overnight unless one of you are with me. And so all these business trips and association meetings and out-of-town things, I did none of it. I never hung out with the boys. In fact, the only time I spent time with other men was in the Boy Scouts. When my kids joined the Boy Scouts, I became a leader. So those were the times, that I feel were very special to me. And it was kind of just my passion for wanting to be connected and not disconnected ever again that funneled me into doing these things with my family. And so I don't think that I really struggled too much, because after the war, after I came back and had all my fingers and toes, I felt blessed.
Yeah.
I have everything God wanted me to have, and I'm not losing it now. And every day is a blessing. You know what I mean?
Sure. And you know what? It just hit me in the story, the irony of you growing up and knowing 3 different fathers, 2 of them obviously making choices to leave or whatever, however it played out in your life, and you not really making that choice, but it being part of your duty and part of your job, and just even connecting the dots on that part, and you being off away from your family going, whoa, this is what my dad did to me. But it was more on purpose, I guess, in a way, versus you not being on purpose, but just the conflict there, right?
Yeah, it was incredible because, I told you, I promised myself even before I had kids, I'm not going to be an absent father. I am not going to divorce my wife or disappear. And yet there I was doing that. And
What
so
do you
reconciling that was very difficult.
What do you think has been your greatest achievement as a dad?
Just being there. And this is the one piece of advice. I'll let you ask the question, but the achievement is this piece of advice: never say no. You could be involved in something very important, but you're home. And I feel like if I'm home, I'm fair game. Whatever I'm doing is never more important than what my kid needs. And my kids know that they can come up to me anytime. Doesn't matter if I'm tappity tap tapping on the computer or reading a book or whatever I'm doing. They have permission to come up to me and say, Dad. And I will turn to them and I'll say yes, because that's how I want them to respond to me. I don't want them to ever say what or it's yes, because we love each other and we care about each other. So that's my one piece of advice to a new father. Never say no, because whatever you're doing at that time can't be more important than your child.
I
And if it
love it.
is, just have them do it with you. Say, hey, I got to finish this. Can you help me finish this? And then we can sit down and talk or go play or whatever. Never give your kid work to do. Do the work with them and see how much better they are at it. And I swear you're going to get a good conversation while you're working.
I love it. My brother, he's got 3 boys, and he's always done such a great job. And one of the pieces of advice he gave me early on was, when they call on the cell phone, answer. He says, man, I've been in meetings and I answer the phone. He goes, when my kids call, I want them to know, no matter what, they can call me, and there's pretty good odds they're going to get me. Now, he's been in certain circuit in the middle of a presentation or work stuff where he literally is the speaking or whatever, but they know they can reach out to him, and that odds are pretty good Dad's going to answer the phone. And I think there's a security in that, even no matter what age they are, right?
I agree. No matter what age they are, they need to know that they can come to their father with anything, and that their father will love them and listen to them and help them.
Dude, I love it, man. I love your story, dude. There's so much more to it, too. I want to have you back on at some point to dig deeper even into some of the stuff that we talked about. But I
Sure.
greatly appreciate you, man, your story, just your resilience and your honesty and in all of this and everything that you've been through. Because I think there's a lot of dads out there that can identify with some of the same stuff. And military dads and even non-military dads that have had to go off, or
Yep.
maybe they
Yep.
travel a lot or whatever. And I've been through that myself. And so it's man, I love it. So I greatly appreciate it. Tell guys how they can connect with you.
Sure. I'm on social media. Twitter's my favorite platform. So it's at MJ Granger, Granger, and then the number 1. So at MJ Granger 1. They can reach out. They can DM me. Usually I'll respond to a DM within a week. But I am on Twitter every day. And if somebody wants to reach out, I'll give them my email address through a DM on Twitter. I also have Facebook, but I'm maybe once a week check that out. So the best way to get in touch with me is to tweet at me. I'd love to talk with other fathers. Yeah, go ahead.
Tell us the name of the book again, the title.
Sure. The title is Saving Grace at Guantanamo Bay, a memoir of a citizen warrior, and it is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's available on Kindle, so you can get it electronically. It's a second edition that's out now, published 2012. So it's in softcover now and also electronically.
Keep sharing your story, brother.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful. God has blessed me with a new friend, John.
Absolutely.
And this has been cathartic for me. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the things that are really most important to me, which is being a good husband and father.
Absolutely, dude. Love it. Thanks for your time, brother.
My pleasure. Take
Talk
care.
to you
God
again
bless.
soon. See ya.
Roger that.